Savannah Pierce's hand trembled as she signed her name on the contract. One signature, 30 seconds of pen against paper, and everything changed forever. She could hear her mother crying in the next room. Her brother's angry voice. Her father's silence, the kind of silence that screamed louder than any words could. But what Savannah didn't know yet was that this signature would lead to a choice so impossible, so devastating, that she would literally have to decide between two kinds of death. And the answer would surprise everyone watching, including herself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Savannah Pierce's phone exploded with alerts. 3 missed calls from her mother. A text from her brother Diego that said only, "Don't come home yet." She was teaching her second graders about vowels when the cold dread settled into her stomach. Something was terribly wrong. She finished the lesson on autopilot, her mind spinning through possibilities. Her father had always been the responsible one. Her mother worked cleaning houses. Diego was in community college. They didn't have problems. They didn't have the kind of problems that made a warning text necessary. The F train was packed when she boarded, the afternoon crowd pushing against her as she stood in the aisle, gripping a pole with one hand and her phone with the other. She tried calling home 3 times. Straight to voicemail each time. Her stomach twisted tighter with each failed attempt. When she got off at her stop, the November cold hit her face like a slap. Her apartment building looked the same as always. 4 stories, peeling paint, radiators that clanked like prisoners. Normal. Everything was normal until she reached the 4th floor and saw her apartment door slightly ajar. Her hand shook as she pushed it open. The living room looked exactly the same, their worn couch facing the small TV, her father's recliner with the duct-taped armrest, family photos crowding the walls from ceiling to floor. But the energy was all wrong. The air felt thick, charged with something electric and dangerous. That's when she saw him. The man sitting in her father's chair wasn't a stranger exactly. Everyone in Denver knew who Silas Kincaid was. You didn't live in Colorado without hearing the stories, the whispers, the warnings. He owned half the construction companies, allegedly ran the most sophisticated crime organization in the state. He was 34 years old and commanded empires with a single look. And he was sitting in her father's recliner like he owned it. Savannah's breath caught. Her mother sat frozen on the couch, hands clasped like she was praying. Diego stood behind her, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. Her father stood in the middle of the room with his head bowed like a man awaiting execution. The man in the chair stood slowly. He was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Renaissance sculptures. Sharp angles, aristocratic bones. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. When his gray eyes locked onto hers, she felt pinned, dissected, evaluated. "Savannah," he said, tasting her name like something rare. 23 years old, literature degree from CUNY, second-year teacher at PS 94. Excellent evaluations. Particularly noted for your work with struggling readers. The fact that he knew these things made her skin crawl. "Who are you?" She kept her voice steady even though her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. "You know who I am. I know what people say about me. That's different." A slight smile touched his lips. "Your father owes me money, Savannah. Quite a lot of it." She looked at her father. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "That's not possible. Papa doesn't gamble." "Didn't," her mother whispered from the couch. "He didn't used to." The world tilted. $375,000? Silas said, his voice conversational as if discussing the weather. "Accumulated over 18 months, mostly poker, some sports betting. Your father has expensive taste in long shots." This couldn't be real. This was impossible. Her father, her strong, responsible father who'd worked construction for 28 years, was a gambler? There has to be some mistake. We can work out a payment plan. He can get a second job. "Your father is 56 years old with a bad back and high blood pressure," Silas said calmly. "How exactly will he earn $375,000? He makes $42,000 a year." The specificity was another violation. He knew everything about them. "What do you want?" Savannah heard herself ask. "Why are you here if you know he can't pay?" Something flickered in his gray eyes. Approval, maybe. I'm here to offer a solution. What kind of solution? He stepped closer, and she fought the urge to retreat. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, something dangerous. You, he said. I want you. The words hung in the air, like poison. Absolutely not. Diego surged forward, but two men materialized from the hallway before Savannah even realized they were there. They were large, expressionless, armed. Diego froze. Sit down, Silas said quietly, and Diego sat just like that. No argument, no resistance, as if his entire body had decided to obey before his mind could protest. 2 years as my wife, Silas continued, and your father's debt is erased. Your family remains safe, financially secure, and completely untouched by my business affairs. You refuse, and your father has 1 week to produce the money. When he fails, and he will fail, the consequences will be severe. Savannah laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound burst out of her, sharp and slightly hysterical. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about contracts. He tilted his head. His eyes searched hers. Your father made choices, Savannah. Those choices have consequences. I'm offering you a way to protect him from those consequences. It's actually quite generous. You're threatening him. I'm stating facts. It's different. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. I'm trying to save your father's life. Make no mistake. If you walk away from this, he dies. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but soon, and it won't be pleasant. Her mother was crying silently now. Her father still couldn't look at her, but it was the certainty in Silas's voice that chilled her most. He wasn't making an idle threat. He was making a promise. Why me? She whispered. You could marry anyone. I need a wife for specific reasons. Someone educated, respectable, someone with no connections to my world, someone who can navigate both the legitimate and illegitimate aspects of my life. He paused, and for the first time, something almost human flickered across his face. Someone I can trust not to have ulterior motives beyond protecting her family. He knew. Somehow, he already knew that she would sacrifice everything for them. You don't know anything about me. I know you spent your college fund on your brother's tuition when your father got laid off. I know you worked 2 tutoring jobs on weekends to help with rent. I know you turned down a better position in Westchester because it would have meant moving away from your family. His eyes held hers, and she realized the terrifying truth. He'd done his homework. He'd researched her completely. I know you're loyal, Savannah. Loyal enough to sacrifice yourself. He was right. She would sacrifice herself for them. She always had. How long? Her voice was barely audible. 2 years. A legal marriage properly documented. You'll live in my home, attend events with me, fulfill the role of my wife in all public capacities. And privately? Something dangerous glinted in his gray eyes. That will be negotiated. Her mother sobbed openly. But when Savannah looked at her father, really looked at him, she saw the fear carved into his face, the shame deeper than any words could reach. She could let this kill him slowly, or she could stop it right now. If I agree, she forced herself to meet Silas's gaze, holding it steady. My family is completely protected. No deaths, no threats, no retaliation ever. You have my word. The word of a criminal. His smile was sharp enough to cut. The word of a man who keeps his promises. Ask anyone in this city, Savannah. When I give my word, it's iron. She believed him. Whatever else he was, he meant what he said. I need time to think. No. This offer expires when I walk out that door. Decide now. Her mother shook her head frantically. Mija, no. There has to be another way. We'll find another way. But Savannah had already done the math in her head. There was no other way. There never had been. I need a pen, she said. The contract was intimidatingly thick. She flipped through pages of legal language until she found the core terms. Duration, 24 months. Compensation, Full forgiveness of her father's debt plus a $100,000 trust fund for her upon completion. Responsibilities, public appearances as required. Maintenance of marriage appearance. Termination clauses, death, mutual agreement, or breach of contract. "What happens if I break the contract?" she asked. "Breach conditions reinstate your father's debt with penalties, major infractions, infidelity, disclosure of confidential information, abandonment would be catastrophic." So she was trapped. "You're committed," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "There's a difference." She looked at her father one last time. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. She signed. Her hand shook slightly, but the signature was legible. Savannah Sophia Pierce. Her name still her own for a little while longer. Silas took the folder and nodded to one of his men, who produced another document. A receipt. Her father's debt paid in full. "We'll marry in 3 weeks," he said. "That gives you time to resign from your position and settle your affairs. My assistant will contact you tomorrow." Then he was gone, taking his men and his presence, leaving behind only devastation. For the next 3 weeks, Savannah moved through her life like a ghost. She submitted her resignation to PS 94. Principal Matthews tried to convince her to stay, clearly sensing something was wrong. But Savannah gave her the prepared story. Sudden family situation, moving out of state, unavoidable. Her students cried when she told them. Little Marcus Chen asked if he could write to her. Savannah had to excuse herself to the bathroom to hide her tears. The dress fitting was surreal. The boutique in Manhattan was the kind of place where you needed an appointment just to browse. Silas's assistant, Simone, guided her past racks of designer gowns to a private room where 3 dresses waited, each more beautiful than the last. "Mr. Kincaid selected these based on your measurements and coloring," the seamstress explained, a tiny French woman with pins in her mouth. Savannah stared at the dresses. Ivory silk and lace, beading and embroidery, the kind of gowns little girls dreamed about. She dreamed about a wedding dress once, back when she thought she'd marry for love. Someone kind, someone who chose her, not bought her. "This one," she said, pointing randomly at the middle dress. It didn't matter which one. She'd be beautiful and miserable in any of them. The night before the wedding, her phone buzzed. An unknown number, a single text. Having second thoughts? It had to be him. She typed back, "Too late for that." His response came immediately. "It's never too late. Say the word and I'll call it off." Her finger hovered over the screen. Could she actually walk away? And her father's debt? Reinstated, his next message read, "Of course." She turned off her phone and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come. Saturday dawned cold and clear. Savannah woke at dawn, her stomach churning. Her mother came in with coffee and tears, fussing over her like she was a real bride with real joy. Her father hadn't spoken to her in 3 days. The guilt had apparently rendered him mute. Diego avoided her eyes completely. The car arrived at 10. The wedding gown would be waiting at the venue. She hugged her mother, nodded at Diego, and ignored her father completely. Let him live with that. The venue was a sprawling mansion overlooking the Hudson River. She'd driven past it once, marveling at the kind of people who could afford such things. Now she was one of them, or pretending to be. A coordinator swept her into a bridal suite. The dress hung waiting. A team of stylists materialized. Hair swept into an elegant updo. Makeup that made her look older, sophisticated, like someone who belonged in this world. When they were finished, Savannah stared at her reflection and didn't recognize herself. "It's time," Simone said, and Savannah's heart kicked into overdrive. She walked down the aisle alone. Her father had forfeited the right to give her away, and she wouldn't have let him anyway. She kept her eyes on the altar, where Silas waited in a black tuxedo that made him look like a movie star, handsome, powerful, completely untouchable. His eyes tracked her approach with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When she reached him, he took her hand. His grip was warm, steady, utterly foreign. "You look beautiful," he murmured, and she hated that part of her responded to the compliment. The ceremony was brief. The judge spoke of commitment and partnership in a voice that suggested he'd done this many times for couples who meant none of it. They exchanged vows Savannah had written herself. Simple. Empty promises. They exchanged rings. A platinum band that felt like a shackle. You may kiss the bride. His hand came up to cup her face, tilting it toward him. His eyes asked a question. She gave the smallest nod. Permission barely. His kiss was soft, almost gentle. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. When he pulled back, she saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Silas Kincaid. The applause was polite, restrained. Savannah turned to face the guests. Her family in the front row, her mother crying, Diego stone-faced, her father's chair empty. He hadn't come. Even for this he hadn't come. The betrayal was a knife between her ribs. The reception was elegant torture. Savannah smiled and accepted congratulations from people she'd never met. During dinner, he leaned close enough that his breath stirred her hair. You're doing well. I'm surviving. That's the spirit. Later, on the private plane to Aspen, Silas loosened his tie and closed his eyes, looking suddenly exhausted. Savannah studied him in the dim light. This stranger she'd married. This man who now controlled her life. The cabin turned out to be a massive lodge, tucked into 300 acres of mountain forest, stone and timber and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountains like paintings. Savannah stood in the great room while Silas dealt with luggage, taking in the vaulted ceilings, the enormous fireplace, the leather furniture, a cage. No matter how beautiful, it was still a cage. Your room is upstairs, he said, appearing behind her. Second door on the left. Mine is at the end of the hall. I see your S. She turned, surprised. Separate rooms? Did you think I'd force you to share my bed? His voice was cold, almost insulted. The contract specifies public appearances as husband and wife. What happens privately is negotiable, and you've made your feelings abundantly clear. Heat crept up her neck, embarrassment mixed with something else she didn't want to examine. The next week surprised her. He made elaborate breakfasts, pancakes, bacon, eggs, perfect coffee prepared exactly how she'd learned she liked it the night before. They hiked through forests ablaze with fall color. 2 hours on trails that wound up the mountain to viewpoints where you could see for miles. He pointed out landmarks, told her history, showed her a side of himself that didn't fit the crime lord image. You really love it here, she observed as they rested on a rock outcropping. One of the few places I can relax. You can come whenever you want, after this week. He pulled out his phone. I've just added you to the authorization list. The house is yours as much as mine now. The gesture was unexpected and oddly touching. Why are you being kind to me? She asked quietly. Why wouldn't I be? Because I'm your prisoner. You're my wife. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment. I could make the next 2 years unbearable. But I don't want to. I want to make them bearable. I want you to be comfortable, happy, if possible. That night, she found him on the back deck with a glass of whiskey, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? She asked, wrapping her sweater tighter. Never could. He turned to face her. You should be wearing a coat. I'm fine. She leaned against the railing beside him. What are you thinking about? How strange this is. A week ago, you were a stranger. Now you're my wife. My mother would have found that hilarious. Why? Because she always said I'd never find someone willing to put up with me. He smiled slightly. She was probably right. You seem fairly easy to put up with, all things considered. He laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his face. What do you get out of this? She asked. Really? Why do you need a wife? He was quiet for a long moment, the whiskey glass turning in his hands. Because I'm tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of surrounding myself with people I can't trust. Tired of wondering if anyone would care if I disappeared tomorrow beyond what my death would mean for their bank accounts. The raw honesty caught her off guard. So you bought a wife? So I found someone with a reason to stay that had nothing to do with my money or power. Your loyalty is to your family. That makes you the most trustworthy person in my life. He met her eyes. Sad, isn't it? It was sad. desperately sad. And for the first time, Savannah felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, but understanding. She moved closer until she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "that you felt you had no other choice." They fell asleep together that night, not because of attraction yet, but because of a fragile connection that was beginning to form between them. 3 weeks after they returned to Denver, something changed everything. He came home with blood on his shirt cuff. Savannah was in the kitchen making tea when she saw it, a dark stain against white fabric. Her hands trembled. "It's not mine," he said immediately, following her gaze. "Who is it?" "Someone who made a very poor decision." He moved to pour whiskey, wincing as he raised his arm. "You said you weren't hurt." "I said the blood wasn't mine. Those are different statements." He downed the whiskey in one swallow. Then he disappeared down the hall. 20 minutes later, she knocked on his bedroom door. No answer. She tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, she could hear the shower running. "Adrian, I'm coming in." "Elena, I'm in the shower." She opened the bathroom door anyway. The glass shower was fogged with steam, his silhouette visible but blurred. "Let me see the injury you're pretending doesn't exist." A pause. Then the water shut off. "Hand me a towel." She grabbed one from the heated rack and held it through the door without looking. He took it, and a moment later emerged with it wrapped around his waist, water still dripping from his shoulders. Her breath caught despite herself. He was lean muscle and old scars. His torso, a map of past violence. "It's nothing," he said, but she could see the fresh bruising along his ribs, the split knuckles. "Sit down, Adrian." She retrieved the first aid kit from under the sink. As she bandaged his hand, her fingers gentle against the darkening bruises, she realized the truth. The violence she'd heard rumors about wasn't some distant thing. It was real. It was him. And she cared whether he was hurt. "Does this scare you?" he asked. "Yes, but probably not in the way you think." "What do you mean?" "I'm scared because I care if you're hurt, and I shouldn't care. You're my warden, not my back." She stopped, unsure how to finish. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "Don't. I keep you separate from this for a reason, but it's who you are." www. It's what I do, not who I am. With you, I want to try. His hand came up to cup her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I want you, Elena. Have since the wedding, but not like this. Not if you're going to regret it in the morning." She pressed her forehead to his chest, trying to catch her breath. "I don't hate you. I wish I did. It would be easier." "Easier than what?" "Than whatever this is becoming." When she opened her eyes, his face was closer. His expression raw, with something that looked dangerously like hope. "What is it becoming, Elena?" "I don't know. I'm scared to find out." "Me too. But maybe we could be scared together." His thumb traced her lower lip. Then his lips were on hers, soft and seeking, asking rather than demanding. Her hands came up to his bare shoulders, feeling the play of muscle under warm skin. The kiss deepened, and she made a sound that was half surrender, half protest. He pulled back immediately. "Too much?" "No. Yes. I don't." She stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. "I need time to think, figure out what I want versus what I think I should want." "Take all the time you need." But his eyes said he hoped she wouldn't. The next week, Silas was consumed by business. He'd leave early and come home late. When he finally called her from Philadelphia, his voice was rough with exhaustion. "Hey, did you eat?" "Yes." "Are you okay?" "Fine. Just tired." The meeting ran long. A pause. "I miss you." The admission caught her off guard. "You saw me this morning." "I know. Still miss you." Another pause. "About last night. We don't have to talk about it." "I think we do. I don't want things to be awkward between us." She carried the phone to the living room, curling up on the couch. "I'm not sorry it happened." No. But I'm not sure what it means either." "It means I care about you more than I probably should given the circumstances. I know the timing is terrible. I know I have no right to ask for anything beyond what the contract specifies, but I can't help how I feel. She closed her eyes. How do you feel? Like, maybe this arrangement doesn't have to be as clinical as we thought. Like, maybe we could have something real if you're willing to risk it. Elena felt the words wash over her. What if I'm not ready? Then we wait. I can be patient, Elena. I've waited my whole life for something genuine. I can wait a little longer. The tenderness in his voice unraveled something in her chest. When will you be home? Tomorrow afternoon. Why? Because I think we should talk. Really talk about what this is and what we want it to be. Okay. She could hear the smile in his voice. Tomorrow then. Sleep well, Elena. After they hung up, Savannah sat alone in the penthouse and realized something terrifying. She was falling for him. Not because she had to. Not because he'd forced her. But because he'd shown her who he really was. Not the monster, but the man underneath. The lonely, complicated man who'd lost his parents, who ran an empire out of obligation, not choice, who desperately wanted to believe someone could see him clearly and still choose to stay. The next day crawled by. By the time she returned at 4, her nerves were singing with anticipation and anxiety. He was already there, changed into dark jeans and a navy sweater. When he saw her, his face transformed with a smile that made her stomach flip. Hi, he said simply. She set down her bag, suddenly awkward. How was Philadelphia? Productive, exhausting, over, thankfully. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching a skittish animal. Can I hug you? The question was so unexpectedly vulnerable that she found herself nodding. He pulled her close, and she let herself relax into his warmth. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other. I've been thinking, she said against his shoulder, about us, about this, and I think I want to try. I want to see if this could be more than an arrangement. But I need you to be honest with me about your work, about the risks, about everything. No more sanitized versions. His expression grew serious. If I'm completely honest, you might not like what you hear. I'd rather know the truth than live in a comfortable lie. He studied her face for a long moment. Okay, but not here. Let me take you somewhere first. He drove them through the city as dusk fell, the skyline lighting up. They crossed into Boulder and wound through industrial neighborhoods until they reached a warehouse. The security nod let them through. Inside, past the exterior operations, he led her to an office overlooking a massive warehouse floor. Through the windows, she could see dozens of workers packaging and labeling what looked like restaurant supplies. This is a distribution center, completely legitimate. We supply restaurants and hotels throughout the Northeast. Imports, specialty foods from Italy mostly, also legitimate. He took her hand and led her to a different window, overlooking a smaller, more secure area below. That's where we handle the other business. Money from various sources gets cleaned through the restaurant supplies. The imports sometimes include items that aren't exactly approved by customs. And occasionally we store things for people who need secure locations, no questions asked. She processed this, her hand still in his. You're showing me evidence that could put you in prison. I'm showing you the truth because you asked for it. This is who I am, Elena. I run a criminal organization under the cover of legitimate businesses. I break laws. I pay people off. I've hurt people who threatened what's mine. If you can't accept that, tell me now. She looked into his eyes, seeing the challenge and vulnerability there. Does anyone die in your business? Not if I can help it. I'm not in drugs or trafficking. Those markets are too violent. My business is money and influence. Sometimes that requires intimidation, rarely violence. But I don't kill unless there's absolutely no other option. How many times has there been no other option? His jaw tightened. 3. In 12 years. All of them were people who threatened my life or my organization in ways that couldn't be resolved any other way. She felt the weight of that number. The reality of what it meant to be married to this man. Tell me about them. He studied her face, then spoke quietly about the rival who'd tried to poison him and killed 2 of his men, the traitor in his organization, the man who'd kidnapped and tortured one of his closest associates. He spoke factually, but she could hear the weight of those choices. These weren't decisions made lightly or forgotten easily. I don't expect you to forgive it, he finished. But that's the truth. Savannah was quiet for a long time. Have you ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it? Deserve is subjective. But have I hurt someone who wasn't directly threatening me or mine? No. I'm not a sadist, Elena. I don't enjoy violence. It's a tool I use when necessary. She stepped back, looking at him fully. This complicated, flawed man who'd blackmailed her into marriage but also cooked her breakfast and held her when she was sad. Who ran a criminal empire but drew the line at drugs and trafficking. Who'd killed 3 people but carried the weight of those deaths. Yes, she said quietly. I'll try this with you. Knowing everything? Yes, I'll try. The relief on his face was profound. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. I won't let you regret this. That's a big promise. I keep my promises. 3 weeks later, a text arrived. An invitation to Victor Raldi's private estate. The message was clear. Come, or face consequences. Savannah's stomach tightened when she saw the dress code. Formal evening wear, which meant Silas was taking her into the lion's den. You don't have to come, Silas said, though his voice suggested he desperately wanted her there. Yes, I do. You don't show fear in his world. You show strength. She dressed carefully in a deep green dress that allowed movement. Minimal jewelry. Hair styled so it couldn't be easily grabbed. Every choice was strategic. When they arrived at Victor's estate, Savannah felt the temperature shift. This was his territory, his rules. The moment they walked inside, she knew this night would change everything. Victor emerged from the crowd, older, silver-haired, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Adrian, and the famous Savannah, how delightful. He gestured toward a private study. Shall we talk business? Silas's protective grip at her back tightened. My wife stays with me. Victor's smile widened. A predator's smile. Come now. I'm sure she'd be more comfortable. Savannah stepped forward before Silas could respond. I go where my husband goes, Mr. Raldi, unless you have something you're afraid for me to hear. Victor's eyes flickered with something dangerous. In the study, 3 of his men waited. Victor sat behind an ornate desk like a king on his throne. Let's talk about territories, Adrian. You've been very resistant to my proposals for expansion. I'm curious why. Because your proposals involve taking what's mine, not taking, sharing. There's enough money in this city for both of us. Victor leaned back, eyes calculating. Unless you're so distracted by domestic matters that you can't see the opportunity. There it was, the moment he pushed, the implication that Savannah was a weakness. She spoke before Silas could respond, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Mr. Raldi, I'm curious about something. You seem very focused on my husband's supposed weaknesses. But you're the one who had to resort to petty warehouse raids and price wars instead of actually competing. That suggests you're the one who's weak. The room went deadly silent. Victor's eyes snapped to her, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened. You're scared that Adrian has something you don't. Loyalty that's earned, not bought through fear. A partner who makes him stronger, not weaker. And that terrifies you, because you'll never have it. One of his lieutenants shifted uncomfortably. A subtle crack in Victor's united front. How many of your people are here tonight because they're loyal versus because they're afraid? How many would stay if they had a better option? My husband inspires loyalty by being worth following. What do you inspire besides fear? Victor stood abruptly, his hand moving toward his desk drawer. Everything happened at once. A gunman targeted Silas. Savannah grabbed a crystal paperweight from the desk and threw it hard, catching him in the temple. He went down, his gun firing wild into the ceiling. In the chaos, Silas moved with lethal precision. He had Victor pinned before anyone could blink. Call them off, or I end this right now. Victor's security froze. They slowly lowered their weapons. Silas released him with a shove. You challenge me again, or you threaten my wife again, and I won't be stopping at your warehouses or your bank accounts. I'll dismantle everything you've built and salt the earth behind me. They left before anyone could stop them. In the car, speeding away, Savannah's hands were shaking. "You threw a paperweight at an armed man." Silas's voice was caught between horror and hysterical laughter. "You actually threw a paperweight. He was going to shoot you." She grabbed his face, making him look at her. "We're both alive. We survived." He pulled her into his lap, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I love you." The admission caught her completely off guard. "I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Elena, completely, desperately. In a way that makes me want to lock you in the safest place I can find and never let you out." She pulled back to look at him. "I love you too. I've been trying not to, but I can't help it. You're infuriating and dangerous and completely impossible, and I love you anyway." His kiss was fierce and tender, tasting like relief and fear, and the strange sweetness of having chosen this life after all the choosing was supposed to be done. 6 months later, her family invited them to dinner. The first time since the wedding. Her father answered the door, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. Then he pulled her into a hug, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, mija. I'm so sorry." Her mother was crying, but smiling. Diego finally looked at her without judgment. The tension that had poisoned their family began to heal. Silas was charming and respectful. He won over her mother with compliments on her cooking. Her father, with genuine interest in construction. By the end of the night, they'd accepted him. But it was what happened next that changed everything. 1 year later, they returned to the Aspen cabin. A small wedding, her family, his trusted people, the criminal council members, who'd somehow accepted Savannah as one of their own. Carlos walked her down the aisle, squeezing her hand. "You sure about this?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything." Silas waited at the makeshift altar, his face transformed with joy. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound. 2 years was supposed to be our end, he said, but you became my beginning. Savannah felt tears streaming down her face. "I signed a contract because I had to. I stayed because I wanted to. I'm marrying you again because I choose you, every day, for the rest of my life." When he slipped the new ring on her finger, Savannah felt the weight of it differently. Not a shackle, a promise. The debt that brought them together was long paid. The partnership they'd forged, the love they'd discovered, the life they were building, those were gifts beyond price, and they were only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in Savannah's position. Would you have sacrificed yourself for your family? Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.